Well, I think I'm just going to get started, and if anybody else joins us, that is great. So, hello folks, my name is Neil. I am the creator, designer, whatever, of Faearth, a indie TTRPG set in an alternate 19th century Earth, where all the creatures from folklore and fairy tale are real, have always been real, and lived alongside humanity. So tonight, just for a bit of fun, I thought I would go on this little solo stream and go through how I create stat blocks for Fey creatures in this game. Okay, Faearth uses its own unique D20 system. Now, if you've played any D20 system, this is like super easy to pick up. Like in 5 minutes, you've got it. Okay, but so it uses its own unique D20 system, but it's fairly simple. All right, and what makes the game different to other D20 systems is that all of the Fey creatures in the game, all the magical creatures in the game, with the exception of a handful, are all creatures that originate in folklore, because the game is set in Western Europe. It's European folklore. If and when we have a successful Kickstarter to publish our core rulebook, we do intend to do expansions. One of my players, Tendai, who's originally from Zimbabwe, and her and I have already been talking about an Africa expansion, but currently it's set in European folklore. But what makes it unique is the attempts by me as a creator to be as authentic as possible in my depictions of Fey creatures as they appeared in the folklore. So you get very, very familiar sounding names: brownie, pixie, kobold, dwarf, elf, but they're quite different to what you're used to from other TTRPGs, especially the Dragon game, because unlike our Gygax, I'm not just taking a book of European folklore and robbing the names of all the creatures because they sound cool. So that being said, these attempts at authenticity obviously impact how stats are created. Okay, so just very briefly to look at some of the basic mechanics of the game. There's 8 ability scores in Faearth. You have Fortitude, Dexterity, Awareness, Intellect, Resolve, Fighting, Magic, and Charisma. Your Fortitude is a measure of your general strength, but also your overall hardiness and constitution. Someone with a high Fortitude, a player could have a character with a high Fortitude and be like, basically say, well, they're actually not that much physically stronger than the average person, but they've got a really tough, hardy constitution. Okay? Dex is your standard speed and agility. Awareness is how aware you are of your surroundings, how much you perceive other things around you. Are you good at spotting hidden doors? Are you good at spotting people hiding? But also, are you good at reading body language? Okay, so an empathy test, for example, a behaviorist test in Faearth will usually use the awareness stat, because how well are you reading a person's body language and facial expressions? Intellect is your intelligence, but also is often a measure of education, but doesn't have to be. Okay, it's just as a useful guide. Resolve is your willpower. Okay, so how strong-willed you are. Fighting is how good you are at fighting, how good you are in melee combat, with a saber, with your fist as a pugilist, whatever. Dex is the stat obviously for ranged combat. How good you are with a pistol or revolver, because it is set in the 19th century Earth, so you're not seeing that many people using bows and crossbows. If somebody is a ranged fighter, they're using a pistol, they're using a revolver, or they're using a rifle. Okay, then your magic score is how magically powerful are you. If you want to play a spellcaster in Faearth, you must have a magic score of at least 1, although if you had a magic of only 1, you would be a really crap spellcaster. If you're creating a spellcaster in the game at first level, you're going to be starting with a magic of at least 3, hopefully 4. Your magic score is also a measure of how many cantrips that you know. Okay, and then charm is charm. It's the charisma stat. It's how sociable you are, how likable you are, but also a measure of physical beauty. Okay, so they're the 8 basic stats of the game. All right, now in Faearth, your score is your modifier. So you're not saying, okay, I've got a 16, that is 16 minus 10 is 6 divided by 2 is a plus 3, like other systems. It's like I have a dex of 3, I add 3 to my d20. Okay, so that's the basics of it. Okay, and there's other stuff, of course, that I'll be talking about as we're going through the stats for the creature, and it'll become clear as I'm doing it. Okay, obviously tonight I'm talking about how I create creatures for Fair from my own system, but you can use my logic and my guidance on this for any creature in, I would say, in any system. Okay, one thing that makes Fair different to other systems is that nearly every single creature in the game has 3 stat blocks. Okay, you have, as you can see on the screen here, young, then adult, and ancient. And the reason for this was because we're trying to make the Fae creatures as authentic as we can and as accurate and close to how they were depicted in the folklore that they originally came from. Now the problem with that is, if every single fairy had all of the abilities that the fairies are described as having in folklore, a single Dominion of Fairies is going to TPK a party of level 5 or lower. And if they're between 5 and 10, you might not TPK them, but he or she will certainly make their lives a misery. So one of the mechanics that I employed in looking at, well, how can I create a system where my players can be facing and interacting with Fae creatures, sometimes getting into fights with them, and not getting wiped out, not getting TPKs all the time, if we're still trying to be authentic to them. I created this mechanic of each Fae creature having 3 stat blocks, young, adult, and ancient. Now, if you work in other games where you don't have this kind of a mechanic, I still think this is a really, really good guide on how to tailor your creature. Okay, and I will get onto that a little bit later. But if you have a creature that you want to throw at your party and you're worried, okay, it's a bit too powerful, well, what if it's a younger version of that creature? So it has slightly less hit points. Okay, it's maybe not quite as strong, its attack modifier is maybe not quite as good. Okay, or you really want to mess up your players, you want to throw a creature at them that they fought a lot of times, like, oh, we've got this, but this one's older, this one's tougher. Maybe it's more intelligent and therefore more cunning and using more tactics. Maybe it's just got more hit points. Maybe it's just better at with its attacks and stat modifiers. So this is where the idea of young, adult, and ancient is really, well, that's why it works well in Fair, but you can use that as a basis for your characters that you're creating to throw at your players in whatever system you're using. It gives you that bit of extra flexibility and can make for a really interesting encounter, especially if you're throwing something at your players that they faced before and they're thinking, oh well, we've got this. So the creature that I am going to be looking at tonight is the Drac. Okay, so the Drac is a type of merfae or aquatic fae. Oh, I don't know why that did that, but that appears in, hold on 1 second folks, I don't know why that's doing that. Oh, I know why that's doing that. Now hopefully this is better now. Is it? Oh, I don't know what the hell's gone wrong here. My screen has gone all messy, so that's good. Sorry folks, I've got about 4 or 5 windows open right now. Okay, now you go over there. Now, sorry folks, I do want you to be able to see things. I'm very apologetic for this. I'm very quickly going to fix this. I've got about 5 or 6 different windows open right now. More interested in you being able to see the captions than being able to see my mug, but you know, my mom says I'm pretty, so and let's put up those closed captions as well. They are super important. So okay, so this is, okay, I think I've got this all fixed. It looks like we're good. I'm going to move you over here. Okay, there we go. So, hopefully that's all fixed now. Excellent. All right, so, as I was saying, the creature that I am looking at tonight is the Drac. So, from the Latin Dracia, These are from French folklore. Okay, if you were to follow our actual play stream, we stream on Tuesdays at 8 o'clock Dublin time, which is Irish Summer Time, British Standard Time, basically GMT, it's Dublin London time. Okay, I think it's Central European -1, and we are 5 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time. But anyway, and our campaign, our actual play, is set in the Auvergne region of France in our alternate 19th century Earth. The Auvergne region being central France. If you're French, geography is not that great, okay? And the Drac actually is a type of fey creature that comes from that region, okay? So they are a type of freshwater fey creature, sometimes associated with spirits and undines, sometimes associated with sirens and mermaids, sometimes associated with tritons and mermen and so forth. They're described as having parallels to the Nordic river fae, the Nixies or Nets, which you find, as I say, in Norway, but also find in Germany as well. And they also said to live amongst other places in beautiful green palaces in the bed of the Rhone River. Okay, so in the city of Auvergne in Provence, it's said to have been visited by a Drac in the past, and folklore has it that in the past they would let golden cups or rings float on the water to attract humans bathing near the riverbanks in order to capture them so they could turn them into their servants or worse. I mean, the folklorist Gervais of Tilbury wrote in the 13th century that he'd known a woman who'd served as a nanny for a Drac for 7 years. Okay, this is actually a motif that we see happening numerous times in European folklore, whereby humans will be captured by a fey creature, an elf or a fairy, or in this case a Drac, to work as sometimes they're captured as a midwife. In Icelandic folklore, there are numerous stories of humans being called upon by elves to help their wives who are in the middle of childbirth. And apparently the elves in Icelandic folklore highly respected human midwives as being better at the job than their own women of their people were. Okay, but you do see this where humans are captured to work as servants, as midwives to help a fairy or a fey creature in childbirth, to work as servants, also as nannies. Okay, in this account from the 13th century, Gervais of Tilbury says that he'd known a woman who'd served as a nanny for a Drac for 7 years, so she was one of the Drac's children, and she'd touched some il pate that was given to her by the Drac, and inadvertently rubbed her eyes with her greasy fingers, and in doing so gained perfect underwater vision. Okay, and then years later when she was in market, she'd been freed by her so-called master, the Drac, and she was back home in a marketplace, and she saw the Drac in human form. Okay, and in the story it says that there's different versions. In some of the stories she called out to him, and others he realized that she'd seen him and he went up to her, and in one of the tales he put his hand up in front of her right eye, and when he did she couldn't see it, and then when he put his hand in front of her left eye, she said, okay, I can see you now, and then with his clawed fingers he tore her eye out. Okay, and in my notes I also says that, you know, the name Drac is also used in Auvergne as a generic term for just the little folk fairies. Okay, and also sometimes used as a variant word for dragon. Alright, now unfortunately I've got too many ones open, so I can't share the actual folklore resources that I have of this. The first bit of resources that I got was from a wonderful friend of mine, Alex, who is French. She is not from the Auvergne region, she's from further south near Provence, and she gave me some amazing stuff, and I'll be able to, based off of the research that she'd done for me, use that as a jumping off point to go online and then find other better resources as well. Not better, but other good, credible resources, because you start doing searches for fey creatures or research for fairies and fae, there's a lot of crap out there, an awful lot of crap out there. I'd say generously 60-70% of what I would read about Europe, specifically European folklore, is not area of expertise, I'm not an expert, my area of familiarity, at least 60-70% of what you read is complete rubbish. That is heavily influenced, if not corrupted, by stuff from modern popular fiction or even the Victorian period, which most academics would consider to be fairly modern anyway. Okay, but anyway, so that's just the basics of them. Okay, but there's in further research that I did on the Drac, they're described in various different forms. In some of the stories, they describe as just being able to appear like beautiful humans. Okay, so just gorgeously stunning men and women. In other stories, they're described as looking like beautiful men or women from the shoulders up, and then from the shoulders down, having long serpent or like bodies. Okay, this is where we're getting into the similarities with sirens. Okay, which are sometimes depicted as having scaled bodies, and also obviously the more obvious one of mermaids, their lower halves being a fish's tail. But then in other stories, the Drac are described as being dragons that live in water. So straight away, that's given me lots of information on how I'm creating this character. The first obvious thing being, okay, well, they're clearly going to be a shapeshifter, okay? And as you'll see as I go through this, I created stat blocks for my Drac in two forms, in a humanoid form and in a dragon form, for young, adult, and ancient, okay? Because we do see in the stories of them being able to change their form, okay? Being able to turn invisible as well, because in their story from Gervais of Tilbury, he describes how the nanny was able to see the Drac in the marketplace when looking through the eye she'd rubbed the oil from the ill pate the Drac had given her on, but when she looked through her other eye and her left eye was obscured, she couldn't see him, so he was invisible. This is another common thing that we see in European folklore. Time and again, actually, we come across stories from various different parts of Europe. We see it in Irish folklore, we see it in Scottish folklore, we see it in French, we see it in German folklore, of humans who were captured by the Fae, various different types of Fae, fairies, elves, goblins, Drac, whatever, and they find some sort of an oil. Sometimes it's a cooking implement, like the eel pate in this story, or maybe it's some sort of an olive oil or a butter that was used in cooking. Sometimes it's a magical oil, and when they rub their eyes, they're now able to see the Fae. And later on in these stories, they see the fairy that had captured them in the marketplace, invisible to all the other humans, but they can see them. And in the story of the Drac, it tore out her eye. In other stories, what often will happen is they'd rubbed only one eye, like in her story of the Drac, and the fairy or fae, when they realise, oh, they can see me, will blind them permanently in that eye. So not physically tear the eye out, but they still get blind. So this is a very, very common motif, but also brings in the fact of invisibility, okay? So this is the basis upon which I'm making this character, okay? The story is not describing them as having superhuman strength or agility, but being magical and being shapeshifters, all right? So that's the basis for our creature. So we're going to start off with our primary stats, okay? And the 8 stats that we use in the fairy system. So a 0 in any of these stats in our system is average, all right? So they're a fey creature, they're elf-like, so they're going to be a bit tougher than your standard human. They're not going to be average, but they're not super strong, so they're not like a giant or anything. So I decided to give them a fortitude of 2. Okay, and if they're fey, they're going to be fairly fast. Okay, we'll have to assume that they're going to be fairly fast. Not as fast maybe as an elf or a goblin or something like that, but they're still going to be pretty quick. So I decided I'd give them a dex of 3. They're pretty sharp. They in the story, the Drac recognizes that the nannies could see them. In some versions, he exclaimed. In others, he was just aware. So I'm going to say, well, they're better at spotting things than the average human, so an awareness of 2. There's no evidence from any of the stories that they were especially smart, that they were particularly cunning or scholarly. So intellect of zero. Does that mean they're stupid? No, that means they are average. Likewise, there's nothing about the stories that suggests that they are particularly strong. Well, and actually, in my system, I often will give my fey creatures a lower resolve. They'll have resolves of zero or maybe even a negative modifier, because in so many stories about the Fae are often described as being very easily distracted by beautiful things, beautiful people, music, and the like. So in a lot of stories regarding the Fae, they're not being described in a fashion that would make you think that they are particularly strong-willed. So zero for that. Okay. Next thing is they're fighting. Okay, well, if they're a magical Fae creature, they're not going to be crap. There's none of the stories talk about their fighting prowess, but I don't want to be completely useless, so I give them a fighting of 1. Okay, and then their magic score. How magical are these creatures? Okay, I mean they're somewhat magical. They're able to shapeshift. They can turn invisible, but in the stories, so in one of the stories that I came across, it described the Drac being able to beguile the mind of a human who'd been staying with them, so they forgot their time with the Drac. Okay, and then I think later they see them and then remember it comes back. I can't remember the exacts. So they're somewhat magical, but we're starting with a young Drac, so not a baby. Okay, young in Feyre doesn't necessarily mean a child. It just means young. Okay, so you can take that to mean anything from 15 to 25. Okay, but they are younger, so I give them a magic of 3. Okay, which would, as I've said at the start of the stream, is a fairly typical magic stat that you would give for a first level character. Okay, and then their charm. Well, in all of the stories are described as being stunningly beautiful, so that's going to be a charm of 4. Okay, now in the Fey system you also have talents. These are flat modifiers that you can add to things that to make them sorry, my dog was moving about. So flat modifiers that we can add to different things. Okay, so there's lots of different ones, and they're fairly sneaky. So I'm going to give them the hide modifiers +1. So if I was doing a dex check for a Drac and just trying to stealth, it would be roll my d20, 3 for their dex +1 for hide. Okay, they're in the some sort of described as being somewhat fast, so I give them swiftness. Swiftness is a modifier that we add to the base speed in my system. +12 +1. Okay, and likewise quick reflexes. Okay, not giving them crazy. Like whenever I'm creating stat blocks for Fey creatures in Fey Earth, the young version of any Fey creature has a +1 or more to any of their talents. Okay, because they are very beautiful, I'm going to give them your classic 3 charisma / charm based skills in other systems. In Fey Earth, their talents: persuasion, deception, and of course seduction. Okay, +1. And in the Fey Earth system, the magic is divided into spheres of magic. The spheres of magic are arcane, which is alchemy and meta magic force, mostly telekinetic stuff. The earth, wind, water, fire. Then you've got the sphere of life, the sphere of death, the sphere of the astral, the sphere of the wild, the sphere of twilight, which is, I call them, I do the in-between places, spells of illusion, but also spells of scrying and interpretation, and then the sphere of chaos, which is spells to beguile the mind and enchant and encharm. And because in one of the stories a Drac was described as being able to make the human forget their time with them, I'm going to give them a talent in the sphere of chaos. Now what does that mean? Mechanically it means that their spell might would be higher. They're going to be a bit tougher and better with those kinds of magics. Okay, now let's look at some of these other ability scores up here. So defense in Fey Earth is 10 plus your dex plus your fighting. Okay, this is important because it's not enough to be just fast. I have, good God, nearly 20 years of fencing experience under my belt. I should really be a lot better with swords than I am. Started off with sports fencing in university for about 3.5 years, then I did historical reenactment for about 7 or 8 years, and I've been doing historical European martial arts for at least 10 years. Okay, and obviously there's some overlap between them because that adds up to more than 20. But I do have some experience with swords, European swords specifically, okay? And as somebody who has many years of experience with fencing and has dabbled in other martial arts a little bit, I know from my own personal experience, as anybody who does any sort of martial art, they'll tell you that being a skilled and trained fighter is just as important as being fast when you're trying to determine how easy or hard someone is to hit. So that's why in Fey you don't just add your dex to a base score, you also add your fighting. So it's 10 because they're average humanoid shape. If they're smaller creature, so a medium-sized creature is a base 10 defense, a small creature has a base 12, so say something like shorter dwarves and the likes and goblins, and then a tiny creature, your fairies, your brownies, your pixies, they've got a base defense of 14 because they're smaller, they're harder to hit. And likewise, when you get into the giant creatures, a giant or a troll is a base defense of 8, and then if you get into, so that's large creature, then giant or huge creatures, and so forth, that drops to a 6 and so forth, okay? So this is a medium-sized humanoid creature, so that's 10 plus their dex of 3 and their fighting of 1 is a 14, okay? Now, this is how I calculate GP is grit points. In Fey, your health is not just based on your fortitude or constitution, but also your resolve, because your grit is how tough you are, how far you can push your body. So if you're playing a character in Fey that has a very high resolve, they're not necessarily have a high fortitude, they'll still actually have a lot of health points because their sheer stubbornness and willpower means they can push themselves further. Okay, so the first thing we're looking at is what's my base grit dice. So for these creatures, they're humanoid, they're not described as being especially tough, so I'm using a base d6. Okay, generally for young creatures, I have a 5 times the health die. Okay, so I'm going 5d6, which seems a bit low, so I'm going to say +2. Okay. Now, how I generally calculate your grit points when I'm creating the stat block for a creature is I just use averages. So the mean average value on a d6 is 3.5. So 5 times 3.5 is 17.2, plus 2 is 19, and then we have another 2 times 5 for the fortitude, 2 by each die, so that's another 10. So that'll be 29, so we just round it up to 30, okay? Actually, it's 29.5, so we're going to round it up to 30, okay? And that's how we're getting there, okay? Now, movement in Fey. For a humanoid creature, you have a base movement of 5, plus your dex and any other relevant modifiers, so such as the swiftness talent. So, the young Drac are given a dex of 3, plus and the swiftness talent is additional +1, so that's 5 plus 4 is 9, but they're in Merfey, okay? So I'm going to give them a swimming ability, and I'm going to say that they're faster at swimming than they are at walking. So we're going to say that's going to be 10 plus 4, so that's going to be 14, and it's meters, okay? So, dark sight, sure, there's nothing in their folklore that says they can see in the dark, but I normally give my magical Fey creatures dark sight of 10 to 20 meters, okay? Which, if you use silly units of measurement, is in the 60 feet approximately, okay? Armor in Fey, you've got 2 stats. Your first number is your defense against melee damage and non-firearms based projectiles, and then the second ability or second stat is your defense against firearms based projectiles and magic. Nothing in the stories say that these creatures are in any way resistant to injury, so I'm giving them an armor of 0/0. Okay. Now, obviously, if you're using other systems like say 5e, this would be slightly different. So, if I have a fortitude of 2, then that would probably be the equivalent of a strength and con of 12. Or no, yeah, 12 or 14, somewhere between that. Okay. If I'd given the creature, say, other talents such as the might talent or the hardiness talent, the might or stamina talent. If I give them a might talent, then that would be initial +1. Then I'd be saying, okay, they might have a strength of 14. If I gave them the hardiness or stamina talent, then I'd be saying, oh, their con is probably 14. Okay, so vulnerabilities. The story does not in any way describe these creatures being vulnerable to anything or being resistant to anything. Okay, there's nothing at all. So their vulnerabilities, they have none. They have no resistances. They have no immunities. And because they're a young creature, they're going to attack once per turn. Okay. Now in the story, it does describe that the woman's eye was torn out. So I'm going to give them a natural weapon of a claw. Okay. All right. So that's going to be slashing, and they have a fighting score of 1, so that's going to be a +1. Okay, they're not especially like big, so that's going to be just a 1d6 +2. That +2 is coming from their fortitude score. Okay, so your fortitude is also your damage modifier with the ones. Okay, special features. Okay, so special features is other cool stuff that you have. Maybe you've got some other feature special maneuvers that you're gonna have. There's a special feature that the Drac has, is they can turn invisible. Okay, the Drac. Now I'm going to say as a minor action. Okay, in Feyre, the action economy is quite simple. You've got one major action in a turn and 2 minor actions in a turn. Your major action is your standard action. Minor actions can you use for things like shooting and drawing weapons, reloading certain weapons like firearms, certain firearms, not all, passing something to somebody. Moving is also a minor action, so if you want to move, you're spending a minor action to move. Reactions are minor actions, so if you have a reaction ability that you think you might use in combat, you will save a minor action. But likewise, as I said, moving is a minor action. So if you don't move in your turn and you're staying stationary, well then you have that minor action for you to do other stuff. So I'm saying that the Drac can turn invisible as a minor action. While invisible, they gain +10 bonus to stealth, +5 bonus to defense, and +5 bonus to attack. These are fairly standard modifiers I give for invisibility. So basically any fake creature that can turn invisible gets these stats. If you have a magic ring of invisibility, you have that ability too. When they attack, their invisibility ends. So fairly standard. Okay, nothing spectacular there. Okay, right. So next we're going to get to magical abilities. Okay, so first thing is mana. Because they're a fey creature, they don't use mana. Okay, so Feyre uses a mana or spell point system. Fey creatures don't use mana because the magic is innate. Your spell might is how tough you are, how strong your magic is. So if I cast a spell on you and you try to resist it, you roll versus my spell might. Okay, these creatures, their spell might for a spell caster in Feyre. Each profession or class has 2 primary ability scores out of the 8. Okay, so for sorcerers, their primary ability scores are intellect and magic. For the druids and the witches, it's resolve and magic, and for the mystics, i.e. the clerics, it's charm and magic. Okay, so to calculate your spell might, it is 10 plus your score in each of your primary ability scores. Okay, for fey creatures, it's 10 plus their magic score and maybe another secondary ability score if I feel, based on the descriptions of the fey creature, that another ability score would be appropriate. So for example, something like a goblin. Goblins are described in stories as being very mischievous, very cunning. They're very intelligent fey creatures. So for a goblin spell might, I'm going to be adding magic to intellect. Okay, elves are often described as being beautiful and seductive, so I might go magic and charm. There's nothing in the stories about the Drac that I felt really added anything to it, so it's just going to be straightforward magic, but they still have that sphere of chaos, so I'm giving them an additional +1. So their spell might is going to be a 14. Okay? Now, what about the spells that they have? Well, the first thing that they had was that they were able to make somebody work for them as their mate or not. Okay, so I'm going to give them the befriend spell. Casting is a major action. Level in Feyre, the level is your spell level, and the Fey creature's magical abilities will also have a level associated with them or a man equivalent. This is important for the purpose of the players trying to counter that magic. If you're trying to use dispel magic to counter the magical effects of a Fey creature, you need to know the equivalent level of that ability so you know how much mana to spend. Okay, so this is third. Okay, the range 10 meters, fairly standard. Resolve. Okay, and then what is it? Okay, I'm just going to copy and paste. All right, so the Drac attempts to charm an individual within range of the spell. I think the Drac is just a friend. If they are successful, the target now believes the caster, the Drac, is a dear friend. Okay, and that they've known for many years. It will treat them as they would any such spell. The spell does not let the Drac to control the target in any way. The duration of the spell is 4 minutes. Blah 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 blah. I just thought this was a really nice thing to add because it kind of ties in with the whole thing of like, oh, convincing him to help. Obviously, in the folklore, the people helped them not because they were buddies, but because they were like literally prisoners. Okay, and that was what they did. But you know, I thought it was nice. Now, of course, the next thing I'm going to add is transform, because in the stories they are described as being shapeshifters. Okay, so I'm going to give it a casting time of 2 minor or 1 major action. Okay. The equivalent of 3rd level spell, self and none, and the Drac turns into a 2.5 meter long serpentine water dragon with large wings to fly through the water and propel itself at great speed. While in this form, it cannot turn invisible. So we now have the stat block for our humanoid Drac. Okay, so in what ways will our dragon form be different? Well, the first obvious thing is it's going to be stronger. So our humanoid Drac had a fortitude of 2. I'm going to give this a 4. Okay. Our humanoid Drac had a dex of 3. I'm going to make it slightly better at 4. They're slightly faster, but not massively faster. Its awareness, I'm going to say, is slightly better because I'm going to say its senses are better enhanced because of the big nose and so forth. Oh, what big eyes you have, all the better to see you with, my dear. Okay? Mental abilities, intellect and resolve, I'm not going to make any better. Its fighting, however, I am going to increase because I'm of the logic that, well, it's going to be better at fighting if it is in its dragon form. Okay? Magic is staying the same, and charm I'm dropping by 1. Charm is a measure of beauty, but also personality. It's no longer quite as beautiful, although I'm sure you'd have some bards who'd want to roll for seduction, but it's also now more terrifying, and intimidation is usually associated with charm. Okay, now, it still has its claw attack. And the fighting's gone up to 2, so it's now a +2. And in its humanoid form, its claw attack was 1d6 +2. But in its dragon form, I'm giving its claw attack 1d8 +4. And I'm also going to give it a bite attack. In general, in most systems, animals or creatures that have a bite attack, the bite attack does more damage. So it's going to be 1d10 +4. Okay? So, we now have the stat blocks for our young humanoid version of the Drac and our adult version, or our dragon version of the Drac. So now we're going to go on to the adult version. So this is where things get really simple for me. For an adult version of a Fey creature, all I basically do, first of all, is I increase all of those base mods by 1. So all of the ability scores go up by 1, and all the modifiers associated with the talents go up by 1. So if you are using a system where you don't have these different tiered stat blocks for a creature, this is where you can start making things more fun. If I was using a creature that I thought would be too powerful for my players, I'll drop the strength, I'll drop the constitution slightly. I'll reduce the number of hit dice and hit points. I will probably lower its armor AC slightly as well. Okay, its attack modifier I've reduced, and the damage from the attack, especially if it's an attack from a natural weapon, a claw, a bite, a tail buff, I'm going to reduce that damage die. If it has a plus modifier to the damage die, I might drop that or scrap it entirely, or I might keep the plus modifier but drop the size of the damage die. Okay, this is where things get fun. So I've got a creature that I wanted to use. I was worried about a TPK. I reduce its intensity a bit to give my players a fighting chance. On the flip side of it, I have an idea for a creature, an NPC, an intelligent monster, let's say, that I want to throw at my party. But, you know, I know they're 8, 10, 12 level. They'll wipe the floor with this thing. They fought these kind of creatures many times before. I increase its abilities. This one it's slightly stronger. Or it has a higher constitution, so it has way more hit points. It's slightly tougher. Its hide is thicker. Its AC is gone up. Its defense is gone up. Okay? Its attack modifier is gone up. It's more skilled with the weapons that it uses. Or because it's bigger and tougher and meaner, its damage modifier, the damage die increases, or the modifier added to the damage die has gone up. These simple things really can make the combat in your game so much more interesting. It's such a simple thing. But let's get on with this, okay? So the young Drac had a fortitude of 2, the adult has a fortitude of 3. The young Drac had a dex of 3, so the adult has a dex of 4. An awareness of 2, this is now a 3. The intellect and resolve have both gone up by 1 to 1 each. The fighting has gone up by 1. The magic has gone up by 1. The charm has gone up by 1. And all those talents that my other Drac had, this one has. I'm not going to add any more talents, but the modifiers go up by 1. Now, in Feyard, we have a wonderful mechanic called the Feats mechanic. It's a mechanic which is unique to Feyard. Other games have similar mechanics, but nothing like feats. There's 3 types of feats in Feyard. There's the combat feats, which allow you to do things like Mighty Blow and extra damage die that you add to your attack roll. Maybe a quick attack, so using your minor action, you do an extra attack, or something like a parry maybe, okay? Then there's the spell feats. You can do similar things for your spells. And then there's a social feats, which you can use in RP situations to maybe glean more information from an NPC, get them to do more for you if you succeed in a charm-based roll, but also you can use some of them in combat too. So for example, the revealing insight feat, which is a social feat, in conversation, if you roll for that when you're trying to do some sort of an empathy or awareness-based roll, you get additional information. In combat, you can use that feat to get information into what your enemy is going to do in the next turn, which then gives you a bonus to your defense. Okay? While I don't tend to add additional talents to a Fey creature when I have the older stat block version of it, I will sometimes give an older version of a creature a feat. This is to reflect abilities that are described in the folklore and the stories that I felt was too powerful for the young version of the Fey creature, but is appropriate for the older and more powerful version of the Fey creature. So, the vulnerabilities and resistance are the same. The young Drac had 1 attack per turn. The adult, I'm going to give 2 attacks per turn. Okay, its claw is still the same. It's slashing damage. It's now a +2 modifier to hit instead of the +3. I mean, I know these are very small modifiers, but in the stories about the Drac, they're not described as being warriors. You know, I mean, plucking the eyeball out of a nanny is not a particularly tough thing to do, you know? Its spell might, its magic was 4, and its spirit chaos modifier has gone up by 1. So for the young Drac, the spell might was 14, but for the older Drac, that spell might is 16. Okay, and I'm just going to copy paste this. This is another thing that I do to recognize the increasing strength in the creature. Okay, so for the young Drac, the befriend spell, magical ability, had an equivalent spell level of 3rd, whereas for the adult it's an equivalent spell level of 4th. The magic system in Feyard goes up to 5th. There's 5 levels of spells, 1st to 5th, the 5th being the most powerful. Okay, so you might think 4th is not strong. 4th is really powerful, okay, because it only goes up to 5. And so if a caster is trying to counter this, they're now having to spend more mana if they're countering the adults doing this versus the young Drac, and the target number has gone up. Previously it was 14, but their spell might is 16 now, so they're tougher to resist. Okay, they can now transform, okay, into a 3.5 meter long water dragon. And now I'm going to give them this other ability as well, which the young one I didn't give. This is the Forget magical ability. The effect of it touches a person and attempts to change their memory, make them forget aspects of their life, make them forget individuals. So this is actually, the thing is, in one of the stories that a Drac had taken a human and actually, sorry, it wasn't just in the Drac, there's other stories that similar on DNA siren-like merfolk from French folklore that would capture humans and take them as nannies or servants or maids or whatever, but they would make them forget their families. Okay, so they would completely forget their families. They're usually women in the stories, sometimes men, but more often women. Often because in the stories women are by the river using the rivers to wash clothes, and it's a merfolk creature in the river, it catches them and pulls them in, but making them forget their husbands and their children. Okay, there's probably a Christian element to that, because a good Christian woman, a good mother, would not forget her child and so forth. But nonetheless, this is a common motif that we see in European folklore, not just French, but especially French, of humans being taken by river fae to live as servants, that they forget their families. So I said, well, we're going to give the Drac this ability where it can make you forget. Okay, so there we go. And then we're going to look at the stats for the adult. Okay, so the young Drac in its dragon form of fortitude of 4. The adult is 5. The dex was 4. It's now 5. The awareness was 3. It's now 4. Intellect and resolve are not changing. Remember, the physical stats are not changing. The young dragon form of the Drac was fighting 2. Now it's 3. Its magic still the same, and its charm, which was 3, is now 4. Okay. The other talents, no different. All right. 2 attacks per turn. Alright, and the claw and bite attacks like so. Okay, so we're seeing yet again how for this version, the adult version of it in its dragon form, it is that bit tougher. Okay, actually one thing I forgot to discuss was the defense and grip points and all the rest of that. Okay, so it was 5d6 plus 2 for the young, so for the adult it's going to be 10. Sorry, D6, what the hell? D6 plus 2. Okay, so the average of a D6 is, mean average is 3.5 times 10 is, that's 35 plus 2 is 37, and then fortitude of 3 times 10 is 30, so that's 37 plus 30 is 67. I actually made this 77 because I felt like 67 was a bit weak for a dragon, so I bumped it up to 77. Remember, these are small dragons, only 3.5 meters. In other dumb units, I'm a maths teacher. I call the imperial system dumb. You know, you can cancel me. A 1 meter is approximately 3 feet, so 3.5, that's 9, 10 and a bit feet. Okay, so big but not massive. Okay, this creature is a large sized creature. Okay, so it's fighting, its dex is 4 and its fighting is 2. Okay, sorry, this is the humanoid version. It's a medium sized creature, so that's 4 and 2 is 6 plus 10 is 16. And the armor is 0, 0, still 0, 0. Okay, Now, oh, and your dark side of 20 meters. Sometimes I might give an older version of a fey creature better dark side stats. Sometimes I don't. It depends on the creature, okay? So for this chappy, okay, just give me a second. I just realized I completely skipped doing the defense and grip points and all that for the young one, okay? So for the young Drac, I had said it was 4 plus 2 is 6 plus 10. 2.5 meters, I'm still saying, is roughly medium size. So defense of 16. Okay? Because it is a dragon, I've given it armor. 3-1. So the first value, the 3, is against non-firearms based projectiles and melee weapon sabers and lights. The 1 is against firearms and spells. Now for its grit dice, 5d6. It had been plus 2, but I'm now making it 42. Because it's a dragon, it's got to be tougher. Okay? So when you do the maths on that, okay, in its humanoid form, it's 30 grit, but in its dragon form, it's 70 grit. Okay? Because in its dragon form, it's got to be tougher. Okay? And the movement and all that had gone up. So that's 10. Movement of 10 and a swimming speed of 17. Okay, so I forgot to do that earlier. Apologies. Now we get to the adult Drac in its dragon form. Okay, so this is now 3.5 meters. So now we're getting into larger size creature. Okay, so we have 5 plus 2. Sorry, 5 plus 3 is 8. All right. But it is a large size creature, so that's instead of plus 10 plus 8, it's 8 plus 8, so that's 16. Okay. So, and you'll see when we get to the ancient one, that defense is going to drop even more because it's bigger. Okay. Yes, I am still here. You stupid Google Meets. Stay in the call. Sorry. So. Because I'm on my own, you see. Now, I'm going to give it a 4-2 for the armor, okay? So I'm increasing the armor by 2 each, okay? Its grit is 10d6 plus, it was 42 for the young dragon form. I'm going to make that 82 now, okay? So when we do the math, it gives a whopping 157 grit points, which seems crazy, but it's a dragon, so it should be high. Alright? And then we have our dark side, 20 meters and so forth. XP, it's something that we have in the game. I'm not bothering with that. XP is... that's a big deal for game designers. In fact, when I first started designing Fey Art, I was going to include XP, but I scrapped it. I now use benchmark kind of XP system in the game. And when we finally publish the game, I'm not going to be including XP in it because I just personally hate XP. And also, trying to calculate XP for creatures is really hard. Okay? So, that's that. Alright? And then we're finally getting on to the Ancient Drac. Okay? So, the adult Drac, I'd given a fortitude of 3. The Ancient one, it's staying as a 3. Because it's old, so it's not going to be... I don't think it should be stronger. Its dex is the same, 4. Okay. Its awareness is still going up though. So the dex didn't change, the strength didn't change. The awareness goes from a 3 to a 4. And the intellect goes up from a 1 to a 2. Okay. The fighting has gone up to a 3. The magic has gone up and the charm has gone up. Okay. So, and this is, you know, yet again, if I'm making something and I want to make a creature tougher, because it's older, I might say, well, okay, its constitution and strength hasn't gone up, but other mental abilities have gone up, okay? So, it's more aware of its surroundings, can perceive more in its surroundings, okay? It's more cunning, it's more intelligent, okay? Our grit, it's now 15d6 plus 2. And now, so 3.5 times 15 plus 2 plus 5 times 3 plus also, another reason why the grit points jump up so much is this 2 for resolve is another 30 on top of that, okay? So it's 128 grit now, so it's pretty tough, okay? You might think That's terrible maths because you're like double counting. Technically I am, but so I added 5d6 for the fortitude, for or say for say 5 times 2 for the young Drac, because it was fortitude of 2 and 5d6, and now it's 15 times 3. So people must say, well, you're double counting now. It's like what that does is your grip points, they kind of bloat, but personally I actually think it works really well mathematically, because it is bloating, but it's on a linear scale, if you get me. So the more ancient the fake creature, the tougher they are, which they should be, so it's going to have higher grip points. Okay, in terms of our defense, we have 4 plus 3 7 plus 10 is 17. So it's now getting very hard to hit. Okay, it's got 3 attacks per turn now because it is ancient. It has its claw attack. Okay, it's now plus 3, and it's 1d6 plus 3. So it's still the same damage die, because remember, our fortitude did not increase at this level. Alright, now our magic is 5 plus 3, so spell might is 18. Okay, and as for the spells, well, our befriend spell is now the equivalent of a 5th level spell. So that would be a minimum of 20 mana for a caster to break it. Okay, this creature is now 4 meters long. 3.5, that was a typo. And it's yet again a 5th level equivalent, and the forget is also 5th level equivalent. So like, it's going to be a lot of mana for a ancient Drac to be gone. Now I just realized I have a mistake. I've already pre-filled in a lot of this stuff. So we got for the ancient dragon form, fortitude to 6, dex 6, 5s, and so forth. These damage dies are getting they should be a +4, and that should be a +4. Okay, this is wrong. That should be 15d6. So 15 times 3.5 is 45, plus 7.5 is 52. 52 plus 82 is 134, and then 15 times 6 plus 15 times 2, so that's at 134 plus 30, that's 164, plus 15 times 6, fortitude of 6, answering him at 15 times 6, 30, 60, 90. So 254. So massively high grip points now for this creature. Okay, and I'm not going to increase the mundane armor, but I'm going to increase the magical armor. Now look at the defense here as well. Okay, so this creature, we're getting into the larger size again. So that's a 10 plus, that should be still 16. Sorry, that was a typo on my part. So even though it's getting tougher, it's not more difficult to hit. Okay, so that's the other great thing about the scaling in this, and it's attached to 3 times per turn. And there we go. There is stat blocks for a fake creature. Okay, so this is how I'm doing the stat blocks for these creatures. I really hope you like this. I hope you found it interesting and useful, and I hope you consider the ways in which I modify my stat blocks. As I said, I have to do it mechanically in this system because otherwise you're getting fairies and pixies TPKing parties below 7th, 8th level. Having a 3-tiered stat system allows us to prevent that happening. But if you're working in other games and other systems such as 5e, for example, you can use this as a basis to modify your stat blocks for a creature to make them easier at lower levels or way tougher at higher levels, using a creature that your party has faced before. There's nothing more satisfying as a GM than seeing the smug look on your player's face as they see what they're fighting and think, oh, we've got this, and all of a sudden the stuff that worked last time isn't working this time. It makes for wonderful moments that they'll be talking about for months afterwards. Okay, so thank you all for joining me. I hope you found this useful. We hope to see you joining us in our stream if you're able to at time zones. Streaming every Tuesday, 8 o'clock Dublin time. But the VOD's also going up on our YouTube channel as well. Finally, one other piece of information. We have a Kickstarter going up right now. If you look for Fey Wanderer under Brambleheart Games, you've got this really fun Kickstarter. A rules light TTRPG system suitable for all ages, in which you play Fey creatures, questing for a treasure in the Fey realm. We've already hit all of our funding. We've actually had 200% of our funding. It was a small Kickstarter, only for €400. So it's all grown great, but if you're interested in how to support it, please consider doing so. Otherwise, thank you for joining us. I'll talk to you again soon. So, bye everybody.